A guest arrives, but leaves only silence behind. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your voices make this journey special. Now let's begin. If you want to turn a quiet Tuesday into a conundrum, the simple way is to ring our bell at 10 minutes to 1, when Fritz is herding lunch into final formation and Nero Wolfe has both feet planted in the trough of habit. At that hour, any knock on our doors an affront to calendars, ritual, and the greasy law of appetite. So when the bell went twice, quick and crisp, I gave the buzzer to the front door and sauntered into the hall with my sympathetic face on. It usually earns something, an apology, a bribe, or a headline. This time I got none of the above. She was somewhere in her 30s and dressed as if understatement had a tailor, a dark suit that watched its language, gloves the precise gray of stormlight, and a hat that would run you a week's pay if you wanted to look inexpensive without succeeding. The face under the brim had the kind of symmetry that makes you believe in geometry. Her eyes were the only extravagant thing about her, and even they kept their receipts. "Good afternoon," I offered. "You're 10 minutes early to be fashionably late and 20 minutes late to be properly early. There's a narrow zone in there where Mr. Wolfe considers visitors." She nodded once like a metronome and then reached into her bag. I've lived by my curiosity too long to flinch at leather pouches, but if she had produced a rabbit, I might have reconsidered several career decisions. What she got was a slim tin box, and out of that, she took a sheaf of narrow paper strips, the kind you feed to a typewriter if you want your message to behave. She selected one and handed it to me with a small apology of a smile, the kind you spend only in emergencies. It read, "I will not speak." I raised an eyebrow that is licensed for such occasions. How strictly are we taking that? Because I can communicate in other ways, but they may get us evicted. Her left glove made a negligible movement. Out came another strip. It is necessary. For now. If it's a vow, I'm impressed. If it's a ploy, I'm intrigued. If it's a joke, it's the first one today that missed, I said. "One moment. You don't march just anybody into Wolfe's office when he's about to sit down to lunch. You present them like you would a duchess or a subpoena." I crossed the hall, pushed open the office door, and gave him the same line I always do when I think he's going to enjoy hating what I say. "Client," I announced. "Not talkative." He had his bulk angled in the throne behind his desk, like the chair had finally surrendered. His eyes weren't even arguing, just halfway closed, as if he was contemplating both the world and dessert. He shifted them at me. "Pfui, you select hours like a gangrel child with a hammer." He muttered. "Is she mute?" "Voluntarily," I said. "She brought her own captions." He grunted, one of the shorter sizes, and flicked his fingers. I went back and showed Storm Grey in. If you ever want to understand Nero Wolfe's idea of welcome, try walking into his office while he's sampling the fragrance of lunch from 30 feet away and pretending he isn't. He made a token movement, which in his case is as good as an embrace, and peered at her with enough interest to count. She executed the 3-step approach without a squeak. Silence, poise, and a precise distance from his desk that respected feet and disdain. Then she extended a 3rd strip. It read, "Mr. Wolfe, I require your silence." That is not the kind of sentence you lob at Nero Wolfe's desk without expecting recoil. My eyebrows did their routine on instinct. Wolfe's stayed where they were. He'd had them tempered years ago. "You aspire to purchase it?" he asked. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. His baritone is built to sit down inside people and stay. She did not look at him or me. She took out another strip. "I propose to retain you under special terms. You will keep silence for a specified interval and provide sanctuary for a conversation in this room this evening. You will not call the police without my leave. You will ask questions, but not outside this house. You will be paid." Sanctuary. Wolfe said, rolling the syllables as if they might leave a stain on the rug. Archie. I heard, I said. She wants to rent the room by the hour. Her eyes flicked to me and back. Not hostile, but calibrating. She slid a long envelope from her bag and put it on Wolfe's desk blotter. Money behaves the way a man does when he knows his way around a woman. Quiet until counted. It didn't make a sound sitting there, but the flap had bulged to a shape that could teach geometry another lesson. Nero Wolfe, she added with a new strip. I'm aware of your habits. I propose 8 o'clock. Fritz will be in tears, I muttered, because so would the veal and the sauce in my stomach. Wolfe didn't look at the envelope. He looked at her with the kind of mild, concentrated interest he usually spends on an orchid with breeding questions. Your economy is excessive, madam. Words are cheap, silence is dear. What is the quality of the silence you seek? She moved a glove, and for a second I thought I saw the shadow of a smile again, this one paid for by relief. It didn't last. Another strip. Your silence from publicity, from police, from conversation outside this room for 24 hours. After that, you may act as you will. I will bring 4 people at 8. You will listen. There has been a betrayal. Someone must be exposed. Tonight the pretense will end. They will not risk a public venue. Only your house will be respected. I doubt, Wolfe murmured, that my house is respected by those with no respect for houses. He wiggled a finger. You ask for too much and offer too little. Who are you? She had that one ready. Miss Vance was printed at the top of the strip. Beneath it, a typed name. Iris Vance. No address. No occupation. The name had a small defect in the O's on the strip, a chip somewhere in the type that made them look as if they'd been bitten from the south side. I filed that, 2 drawers over from curiosity. Your coyness, Wolfe said, is not enchanting. It is merely an inconvenience. Are you in physical danger, Miss Vance? She shook her head, then amended. Not this hour. And you cannot speak because your tongue has been retired? She ignored the bait and offered instead, You may refuse. I will go elsewhere. But I think you will not. The envelope is $5,000, additional when the problem is resolved. That was more than a week's pay, even in our neighborhood. The envelope didn't fidget, but I did. Wolfe performed one of his rare feats of manual labor. He picked up the envelope, plucked it open with fingertips, and made the fan of notes talk in that soft whisper money has when it's new. He didn't count them. He weighed them, with eyes, with habit, with whatever scale he keeps for such matters. He returned the envelope to the blotter as if it might bruise. What is the subject tonight? He asked. She put down a new strip. Betrayal within a fund. Sabotage of a public announcement. A struggle over credit and control. There is blackmail. Of whom? Her eyes held his. Another strip. Of more than one. That is the point. I will bring 4. Each had opportunity, motive, knowledge. One has done more. Tonight we either settle it quietly or it breaks noisily. We require your mind, your neutrality, and your room. Fritz tapped the office door with the low cough a man uses when he carries plates that cannot be dropped and news that cannot be postponed. He peered in, eyes asking if the world was ending. He saw Miss Vance and recognized the look in our eyes. Money in the room eyes, and retreated to keep his sources from committing suicide. Wolfe lifted his head and sniffed, not at Fritz's handiwork, but at the air of the proposition. He leaned back, closed his eyes for a second, and then opened them on Iris Vance again. You will oblige me in 2 particulars, he said. First, no recording devices, no stenographers, no tricks. You, if you choose, may continue this nonsensical silence, but others must speak. Second, you will write now the names and addresses of the 4 people you propose to bring, with their associations to this fund. Her glove hesitated. Then she took out a sheet of standard paper, typed at speed with the crisp, unhurried firmness of someone who has practiced not being hurried. The little bite out of the O's obliged on every line. When she was done, she slid the page to Wolfe. He didn't touch it. He angled his eyes. I moved to read. It said, Mr. Alistair Newcomb, Managing Director, Moreland Civic Fund, 2 East 74th Street. Mrs. Lenore Wyatt, Composer and Moreland Grantee, 415 West 12th Street, Apartment, 5C. Mr. Camden Ross, Counsel to Moreland Fund, 17 Battery Park Plaza. Miss Ada Breck, Program Officer, Moreland Fund, 120 West 86th Street, Apartment, 4F. Below, in smaller type, I will also be present. I'm Director of Communications, Moreland Fund. The word Moreland rang no chimes for me. It had money in it and philanthropy and probably enough politics to season a stew. Wolfe's brows rethought their position. Moreland? He said. We're not in the business of renting rooms, Miss Vance, I told her, especially the room with the fat man and his temper in it. But he has his own rules for making exceptions. If you were prepared to be honest with me, now would be the chance. Do you know who, or do you only suspect? She handed me a short strip. I know the shape. Not the face. Wolfe made a small sound that belonged somewhere between a snort and a chuckle. Metaphors at noon, he said. I shall be punishingly outnumbered. He poised a finger. Archie, you will verify that none of these addresses belong to the moribund or the escapist. You will deliver a written summons to this office at 8 o'clock precisely, with the condition that artifice will not be tolerated and that the conversation is under my direction. Include the warning that if any meddling occurs within this house, I will act with dispatch. Miss Vance will sign the summons as my client. I said, that last part is novel in a woman who won't speak. Miss Vance had a strip ready for the complaint I hadn't made yet. I do not want to endanger Mr. Wolfe by my mere approach to his door. If you refuse, say so. Otherwise, accept the risk. Wolfe cocked his head a fraction. I have seen that look checkmate men sitting far from any chessboard. Accept the risk, he repeated. Ha! You have not considered the obvious. That you come here and pretend to place me under some vow does not remove me from my habits. I do not keep silence to please clients. I keep it to please myself, and to my satisfaction, not yours. Still, he moved a finger toward the envelope. You have tempted me with both affront and bait. The affront is to my house. The bait is to my curiosity. If she had been the kind of woman who lets breath out showily, you would have noticed a relax around the eyes and lips, but she wasn't, and it didn't. She simply gave a small nod that said she had expected him to take the money and the affront together. Very well, he said. Return at 8 with your quartet. Archie will have chairs and ashtrays arrayed. Fritz will be forewarned that I shall dine early, which will cause him agony but not disorder. We will hear what must be heard. If your case stinks, Miss Vance, you may depend on my nose. She bent and produced one last strip. You will keep silence. With police, press, and others for 24 hours. Promise. Wolfe regarded her. If he was offended by the way she tried to throw reins across his neck, he didn't flick. I will promise this. I will act as I see fit for 24 hours, without summoning the police, unless you have misled me regarding danger in this house. My silence is always conditional on honesty. She weighed that, nodded, and then did something that struck me twice, once as habit and once as craft. She took the typed list back and affixed to each name a small, neat check mark before returning it. It was the kind of mark that doesn't expect to be noticed and always is. Wolfe's eyes ticked to it and back to her. Who will deliver the summons? She typed on a new strip. Archie will, Wolfe said. These people are, I presume, reachable and do not require ferrets. Archie is entirely competent for the task and for the opportunity to display his social graces in 4 neighborhoods. I'm honored, I said. Should I bring camellias? She ignored me and extracted a slim envelope from her bag. It held 4 embossed cards and 4 fresh blank envelopes. She passed them to me and then, with the same precise motion, took a pen from her jacket and signed each card in ink. Iris Vance. The signature was fluid. The fact that she could sign with such confidence but wouldn't speak did something uncomfortable to my opinion of her. It started to admire, and it started to itch. Miss Vance, Wolfe said, lowering with courtesy. There is one more inquiry I will make despite your stratagem. Do you expect someone to attempt an intrusion here? Her gaze held, and she lifted a strip that had been typed and waiting under the others like a trump. If they are what I think, yes. They are desperate enough to listen. The one who must be afraid is more so. Your house is respected because it is impregnable. They may test that. Ah, Wolfe said softly. It was not a laugh or a bark. It was more like a word that had slept well and woke hungry. Very well. Archie, assist Miss Vance to the door. Fritz will hate me, but he has practice. He turned his head slightly. Miss Vance, you have bought my attention. Do not presume you have acquired my compliance. At 8, she nodded again, slipped the tin box away, and offered her hand to me. It was cool as a bank's marble and lighter than it looked. I took her to the hall. Careful out there, I told her, because I am entitled to 1 cliché a day, and sometimes they do good work. She gave me a final strip, smaller than the others. Thank you, mister. Goodwin, I put her out on West 35th into a chunk of April that couldn't decide whether to be friendly and was trying both weathers at once. I watched her to the corner and then shut the door. When I turned back into the office, Wolfe had already pressed the bell for beer. Sometimes he does it to console himself for saying yes. You bought it, I told him. He pried the cork and let that first ounce go to the foam. I do not buy trifles, he said. I'm not certain that she is a trifle. She's not, I said. The Moreland Civic Fund, ever hear of it? He made a small face. Marginally. Money extinguishing guilt with philanthropy is not novel. The name Newcomb I know only as a name. Ada Breck is nothing. Lenore Wyatt. Why is a composer a grantee of a civic fund? I'll ask her, I said, unless she sings her answers. You noticed the O's on her strips? Very good. He took a sip. The O's are wounded. The defect is on the typeface. Not unique, but not ubiquitous. It gives us an optic. Also, she came at this hour knowing my habits and seeking to exploit them. She expected me to refuse, hoped I would accept, and is prepared for both. It is all tiresome. You can say no, I suggested, purely for the record. I have said yes, he replied. It is not to her that I would say no. It is to the fellow who will test my house. Fouet. Archie. Have one of the boys watched the street this afternoon? Not Saul yet. He is overqualified for peeping at quiet stone. Fred or Ori can idle. Fred has a wife and 3 kids. He knows how to idle, I said. But do you mean expect a break-in before or after the party starts? If before, then a scouting. If after, then stupidity. Either would be instructive. Fritz's step announced that the veal en croûte was not going to be served to a tranquil man. He came in like a disappointed mother and put the tray on the stand with a sigh that had been aging since breakfast. The aroma forgave him. Wolfe took a long, reproachful look at the clock. You will deliver the summonses, Archie. Phrase them civilly. Remind them of punctuality. Bring back any information your eyes encounter on the way. There is always information. Will do, I said. And what should I tell them if they ask what this is about? Tell them nothing, he said. Silence has been purchased. We shall see by whom he forked veal with a grace he reserves for things that belong to him. I took the cards and the addresses and went to my desk to draft language that would get 4 people who might not like each other into the same room with a man they might like even less. Before I left, I did something else. I went to the shelves behind Wolfe's desk where the heavy dictionaries sit as if they've agreed lawyers need to strain. I ran a finger along the edge and looked at the dust. If someone came tonight looking to plant something, I wanted to be able to tell. The dust this afternoon had a certain nap to it. It wouldn't be the same if a desperate man ran his knuckles under those headings later. It was just a thought. It made me feel useful. Then I put on my hat, pocketed the cards, and headed out to find 4 people and upset their plans. If I did it right, they'd show up on time, sit in Wolfe's office, and try to keep their faces where their words weren't. And if I did it the way I usually do it, somebody would do something stupid before dessert. I wrote out Wolfe's language on the embossed cards with my neatest hand, the penmanship that gets you paid and not invited to weddings. At the request of my client, Miss Iris Vance, Mr. Nero Wolfe invites you to his office at 8 o'clock this evening for a confidential conference under his direction. Punctuality is imperative. No additional parties. No publicity. I left the bait about the subject dangling because if you tell fish what's on the hook, they stay in the water. Fritz was mourning in the kitchen in a dialect of clatter. So I phoned Fred Durkin at his lair and told him to park his shoes where he could keep an eye on our stoop. I didn't give him romance to go with it, no descriptions, no shadows, just that we didn't want practice on our lock today. On the sidewalk, April was still testing its angles. I started east. Alistair Newcomb at 2 East 74th was the kind of address that teaches marble to behave. The doorman sized me up as an interruption that had learned to knock. Newcomb saved me from a relay race by meeting me in the lobby, which he owned by posture alone, lean, iron-colored hair, and a mouth that liked to close on endings. His suit had learned to be quiet, the way expensive things do. "Mr. Goodwin," he said after I supplied it. "What exactly is this?" "An invitation bordered by a command," I told him. 8 o'clock. Nero Wolfe. Confidential. Bring your temper, but leave your entourage. He read the card as if the ink might smear and glanced at me for the fine print that wasn't there. "Miss Vance," he said slowly, tasting the name. "This is irregular." "Regularity is for public parks," I said. "This is an alley." His eyes flicked toward the door, making me aware there was somewhere else he had planned to be at 8 that he'd rather admit to a dentist than to me. He covered it by handing the card back, then taking it again. "Who else is invited?" he asked. "People you've met," I said. "And a few you'll wish you hadn't." That got the corner of a lip. He pocketed the card. "I'll be there," he said, and turned away without asking about terms. Men used to chairing meetings think attendance is a concession. It's not. It's material. Downtown to Battery Park Plaza, where the corridors are all glass and wood and the air is filtered before it's allowed to touch you. Camden Ross's office had a receptionist who looked like a metronome and a view that looked like a painting of a harbor. Ross came out with a hand extended and a smile calibrated to be specific to me. He was my age plus or minus 5, with hair that would gray well and a suit that knew which side of a courtroom has the window. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Nero Wolfe." Well, I agreed, and gave him the Iziri card. He read, glanced up, and then said the smartest thing anyone had said yet. "No additional parties?" "None," I said. "Don't bring a stenographer, a witness, a bailiff, or a rabbit." He smiled as if he had already thought of all of those in that order. "And the subject?" "We'll all find out together," I told him. "At 8. He tapped the card against his knuckles. "Miss Vance signs." Interesting. He didn't ask if she was paying because he was too well trained. "I'll attend." "Wear something you can sit in," I advised, and left him looking at the harbor like it owed him an answer. West 12th had a door with peeling paint that had never learned shame. Lenore Wyatt opened 5C with a scarf in her hair and an expression that suggested someone had edited her day without permission. A piano occupied the room the way an elephant occupies a couch, and the air was full of the smell of coffee and the sound of a single dissonant interval hanging there because she had left it hanging. "Yes," she said. I gave her the card. She read it and exhaled without letting it be a sigh. "Iris," she said, more to herself than to me. "She's doing this." "She is," I said. "And before you ask, yes, Newcomb is coming, and no, I won't list the others." 8 o'clock. "Will you be recording?" she asked. "I won't." "No," I said. "No machinery, no photographs, no press. Just Wolfe and his temper." She let the card drop onto a music stand where a page of notes looked like a swarm of small, polite insects. "We were supposed to announce on Friday," she said, not to me. "We can't now. Not without—" She cut it, eyed me, and shook her head. "Tell Mr. Wolfe I'll be on time." "You just did," I said, and bowed out before I took sides with the unresolved chord. Ada Breck's building on West 86th had an elevator that complained and a hallway that didn't, and when she opened the door on 4F, she had the pallor of a woman who has been spending too much time with spreadsheets and apologies. She was late 30s, plain in the way that suggests a habit of efficiency, with clipped hair and a cardigan that had taken comfort vows. I gave her the card. She didn't read. She looked at the signature, and then at me. "Is he really doing this?" she asked. "Wolfe?" "He's sitting," I said, "which is how he does anything he cares about." Her mouth worked once. "Will Iris—" She stopped. "Never mind. I'll be there." She held the card like it might burn. "It's gone too far," she added to the air beside me. "Then turn around," I suggested, and left it there. On my way back, my phone warbled. "Fred, a guy in a tan raincoat's been reading the same paper on your block for 40 minutes, he reported. "He's got the wrong page for that long. He checked your bell once, like it might bite him." Also, a delivery truck asked if we were expecting window work. I told him we expect nothing and got the license for your scrapbook. "Keep your seat," I told him. "If he learns to read, let me know." The Brownstones Hall felt the way it always does when Wolfe has taken money for something he might resent, like a lion has agreed to babysit. I reported in the office. Wolfe had dined early. A plate stood on the stand with the kind of annihilation that suggests justice has been done. He listened to my account with his eyes at a half-mast, opening them a little for Newcomb's controlled flinch and a fraction more for Ada's gone too far. "Good," he said when I was done. "Arrange the room. Mr. Newcomb on the red chair by the globe. Mr. Ross on the settee to your right, nearest the books. Mrs. Wyatt in the yellow chair by the window. Miss Breck beside the desk, where she must look at me and not escape the corner of her eye. Put ashtrays in reach for all, but remove the Montenegrin knife from the desk. Its presence would invite psychology. Lock the drawer where the revolver rests. A gun is a symbol even when not in use. And check the window latches. Expecting acrobats?" I asked. "Expecting men," he said. "Which is worse?" I did as told. When I reached to slide the desk knife into the drawer, I noted the edge of dust I'd traced earlier and found it the same. No visitors yet. Good. I set the chairs as specified and put out fresh glasses because some people talk only when their mouths are busy. Before 6, Fritz brought me a report without words. A florist's box on the stoop that had been refused. The card had read, "For Miss Vance," and nothing else, and the messenger had asked what time she might arrive with a curiosity that was not professional. Fritz had saved the card. I held it up to Wolfe. It was printed, not typed, but the sentiment was there. Someone wanted inside. Wolfe grunted. "Fred?" "Watching," I said. and unamused. Good. He leaned back and closed his eyes. At 10 to 8, Archie, we will both be seated. At 8, they will arrive. And before 9, someone will attempt to purchase my opinion. Be prepared to watch the man who is selling. At 7:45, I made another circuit of the room. The chairs were set at Wolfe's angles, ashtrays out, knife out of sight, clinkables in reach. I checked the window latches again because paranoia is a professional vitamin. The one nearest the globe had been set straight by my own hand an hour ago. Now it was canted a hair off true and wore a faint graphite smear on the brass like a dirty thumbprint. I bent for a closer look. The sash was still tight, but the smear wasn't mine. I don't use pencils on hardware. I rubbed it on my cuff and it came away. I backed off and told Wolfe. He didn't stir. He let the idea come to him instead of going to it. So, he said, they will test everything they can reach. Tell Fred to look up, not down, I phoned. Fred gave him the altitude adjustment and went to the hall as the bell sounded. Iris Vance was early by a careful 5 minutes. She had changed nothing but a string of small pearls in the set of her jaw. She handed me a strip in the vestibule before I could do my doorman act. Search for devices. They will bring them. We have a coat room, I told her. We do not have a Faraday cage. She allowed the ghost of a nod. Fritz took her coat as if it might explode. I showed her in. Wolfe inclined an inch. She didn't sit. She scanned the room with those methodical eyes and then selected the armless chair by the door, an exit that could be watched and used. We will observe, mister. Wolfe's rules, I told her, in case the vow had damaged her hearing along with her speech. No machines, and if you brought a printing press in your bag, it waits with Fritz. She produced the tin box and laid it on her lap like a pet she was training not to bark. A strip slid out between 2 fingers. Thank you. More bell. Newcomb arrived on the dot of 8, looking like a man to whom time reports for duty. He saw Iris, stopped half a step, and then ground forward. Miss Vance. He inclined not quite as much as Wolfe had. Mr. Wolfe gave him the minimum. Mr. Newcomb, place your devices on that tray, if you please. Newcomb lifted both hands to show they were empty, which was not responsive. He reached in his inner pocket and produced a phone the color of a conscience and set it down. This is irregular, he said, perhaps for practice. It will be when we finish, I assured him, and parked him by the globe where Wolfe wanted him. He smelled faintly of wintergreen and boardrooms. Ross came next with the look of a man who likes to be last, because it lets him enter at the right moment and control the tuxedo. He smiled at me like we'd known each other since homeroom and gave up a phone and a little recorder the size of a deck of gum without being asked. Habit, he said. Break it, I suggested. In here, there are no habits but ours. He chuckled as if I had been charming, and as I stepped back to let him by, he pitched his voice low enough for Wolfe not to strain. Mr. Goodwin, the fund is prepared to compensate Mr. Wolfe for his time regardless of the outcome. There are, of course, implications if he were to accept any other engagement with parties adverse to the fund. I had been told to watch the man who was selling. He was. We don't sign exclusives with strangers in our hall, I said. We don't sign them with friends either. Merely clarity, he murmured, and moved into position on the settee, less interested in the books behind him than in the muscles on Newcomb's jaw. Ada Breck arrived 2 minutes after, pale and compressed. She put a phone on the tray like it had been burning her palm and glanced once at Iris, once at Wolfe, and not at all at Ross or Newcomb. Miss Breck, Wolfe said, with a shade more courtesy than regulation. Take that chair. She did, near the desk. When she sat, her hand went to her throat, where a small key on a thin chain lay under her collarbone. It was no ornament. It had the plain, sharp look of utilities. When she saw me see it, her hand dropped. Lenore Wyatt made an entrance by blowing past the bell and rapping once directly on the door after I'd opened it. She wore a coat that had lost a fight with a dye bottle and eyes that had been practicing indignation. "This is absurd," she announced as if she were arguing with a conductor. "I'm late because I was deciding if I was ridiculous." "History's full of people who are both," I told her. "Phone on the tray." She actually hesitated. "That's my work." "This is mine," I said, and held the tray steady. She surrendered the phone like a concession in a movement she controlled. Inside, she clocked Iris, measured the faces, and settled into the window chair as if timing a bar. "Now," Wolfe said, when they were arrayed. He turned his head a fraction, and I took my post against the red leather of the wall where I can see eyes and hands without being seen by thoughts. The tray with their shiny little leashes sat on the low table where Fritz puts finger sandwiches if the world is sane. It wasn't. Wolfe let a beat stretch thin. He has a way of making air do his work. "You have intruded upon my house," he said mildly, which is how he says he feels a draft and will close it with a brick. "You will conform to its conditions. Miss Vance has procured my forbearance for 24 hours. In exchange, I will hear and I will, perhaps, speak. No one will record. No one will depart without my leave. If you cannot abide that, remove yourselves now." No one moved. Newcomb's lips did a very small thing, which looked like 15 years of bargaining trying to figure out where to sit in this conversation. Ross folded his hands and looked as if he approved of how the meeting was being run, which is a lawyer's trick when he isn't running it. Ada stared at her knees. Lenore's foot found a tempo on the carpet that would have complicated a waltz. I would have given the room a 9 for tension and a 2 for rapport. Wolfe glanced at Iris. She did not raise a strip. She looked at him and then at me, and then down at the tin box. Her throat moved like a person swallowing a decision. Before Wolfe could launch it, Fritz tapped. He had an envelope on a small silver salver as if we had become a club. "This came under the door," he said, and left. I took it, checked it for lumps you don't want, and slit it. Inside was a single slip typed on a machine that didn't know Iris's chewed O's. "Ask about April 5th. Ask who has the key." I showed it to Wolfe. He looked at the line about the key and then at the small, unornamental one at Ada's throat. Her hand had risen toward it without instructions and now hung in midair. "Archie," he said. "I see it," I answered. I also saw the window latch beyond Lenore's shoulder, slightly off true, and the graphite I'd rubbed away that had left the brass looking raw. Outside, beyond the glass, across 35th, a tan raincoat found a new place to lean. "Very well," Wolfe said, and let his lids come down and up once. "Since some coward has chosen to scratch at my door with anonymous prompts, we will begin with that. April 5th. The key. Ross opened his mouth and then closed it. Newcomb decided not to frown and failed. Ada's fingers closed on the key until her knuckles whited. Lenore's foot stopped tapping. Iris, who had bought our silence, didn't lift a strip. She opened her mouth a fraction and then closed it again, something that cost her. Wolfe's eyes moved to Newcomb first, as if he had drawn lots and lost. "Mister?" "Newcomb," he said, and steepled his fingers. "You will tell me what was scheduled for Friday and what occurred on April 5th. Newcomb's jaw tried to set an example. Friday was to be the public launch of the Moreland Fellows, our first major civic arts commission in 5 years. Miss Wyatt is the inaugural fellow, partnerships with 3 community centers, $150,000, with substantial private matching. We've been under embargo with the press for 2 weeks. He wet his lips. On April 5th, after business hours, a restricted cabinet in our program office was opened and materials were altered. The press packet master, the internal credit sheet, and the donor talking points. The alterations changed attribution. They reassigned origin and oversight of the Fellows program. To whom? Wolfe inquired. as if he were asking which cheese had been misfiled. Newcomb's eyes flattened. To Miss Breck, Ada didn't flinch. Her fingers tightened on the key at her collarbone until the fine chain protested. "That's a lie," she said low. "The altered sheets named me because the person doing it wanted this to look like I did it." Ross's voice came in like a cushion. "The board is aware of the intrusion, Mr. Wolfe. We have not gone to the police because the matter is injurious to reputations and donors." Wolfe finished for him. "Yes, the fund has stomach lining. You think the police would abrade it? Phooey, the key, Mr. Newcomb." He looked offended without performing it. "Two keys exist for that cabinet. Miss Breck holds one. The other is kept by the building superintendent in a sealed envelope for emergencies." "And on April 5th? Wolfe asked. "Which of those two was used?" Ada's mouth moved before she permitted it. "Mine wasn't. I had it." Her fingers made a small slide on the chain. "I was at Lenox Hill from 6 until after midnight. My sister—" She cut it, not from drama, but from economy. "My key never left my neck except when you remove it to bathe," Lenore said, not sweetly. "Or sleep. Or forget. How expert is your memory when reputations are combustible?" Ada's stare snapped to her. "I don't forget." Newcomb opened a hand. "The superintendent's log shows his envelope was intact as of the morning of the 6th. No sign of tampering log," Ross repeated, bland. "Initialed by himself." Wolfe shut his eyes to the thickness of the alibi. "Who discovered the alterations?" "I did," Iris typed, the strip whispering across her lap. "In the corner of my eye, I saw the O's with their small south side bite. At 9 the next morning." "Miss Vance," Wolfe said, "what else occurred on the 5th?" She produced another strip she had prepared. She had packed Prudence. "At 4:45, I received the first demand. It was typed. No signature. It instructed me to postpone the launch, to amend the press remarks, to credit the program differently, and to ensure that Ms. Wyatt would not be the face of it. It also said Newcomb must announce an internal correction on prior restricted funds. If I complied, they would provide me with a document to exonerate the fund. If I refused, they would forward materials to the press, typed," I echoed. "Show me one of the notes." She shook her head half an inch. Another strip. "I did not bring them." "Convenient," Ross murmured, and let a small smile touch him before he made it starve. "Mr. Ross," Wolfe said, "you received one?" Ross matched his breath to his answer. "Yes. It suggested that if I valued the fund's shield, I should advise Mr. Newcomb to take the corrective action mentioned and to urge a postponement, or else my prior retainer relationship with one of Morland's donors, now deceased, would be mischaracterized to the press." "Which would be accurate?" Wolfe asked. "Inaccurate and unpleasant," Ross said evenly. "And beside the point." "Nothing is beside the point," Wolfe said. "Miss Wyatt." Lenore's laugh had no humor in it. "Mine said if I didn't resign the fellowship in protest, conveniently clearing the way for another artist they would name, someone would circulate a packet about a lift in a piece I wrote 10 years ago. It wasn't a lift, it was a quotation. Documented. But nobody cares about the difference when there's a headline. Mr. Newcomb, I was told to announce changes in oversight and to revise the donor messaging. And that if I didn't, a draft memo, a draft that was never adopted, about reallocation of restricted funds would be clarified for the public in a way that suggests I am cavalier with governance." He set his mouth. "I'm not." "Of course not," Ross soothed. "We're all saints framed by ink." "Archie," Wolfe said, "collect Mrs. Wyatt's phone from the tray I took it, flipped the case, with my thumbnail to make sure there wasn't an extra skin of something, and handed it to him. He didn't turn it on. He weighed it in his palm and then returned it to the tray. Keys, he said, physical and metaphorical. Miss Breck, do not clutch that one. You will indent your skin. On April 5th, after hours, the cabinet was opened. You were at Lenox Hill. The superintendent's envelope declared its innocence, therefore a third key or a surrogate. A lock may be impressed with graphite to show the line where pressure meets tumblers. Mr. Goodwin found graphite on my window latch, which I do not employ on my brass. He turned his head, minimal degrees. Someone tested ingress here today. Someone tested ingress there on Tuesday. If the same someone supplied the anonymous prompt we just received, he's lively and indiscreet. Ross shifted. You think the person who typed that note is watching this house? Why would he help you? Why would he point at April 5th? His toes are cold, Wolfe said. And he is not helping me. He is hurting you. He wants to force one of you to slip. Lenore's foot resumed its soft tattoo. We're all very flattered. Be still, madam, Wolfe said without heat. You said the blackmailer would name another artist. To whom? To me, she snapped. Not in the note. In a call. Yes, they called. They said, the fellowship can still go forward if you step aside. We'll recommend someone you respect. The name wasn't spoken. A man, I put in. What makes you think that? She demanded. Because you said they called, but you quoted he by voice. Deep. Or you're careless with pronouns. It happens. She froze, ran a hand over her scarf, and then nodded, fractionally. A man. Mr. Newcomb, Wolfe said. Who generated the concept of the Fellows program? Whose paper first proposed it? All eyes, even Iris's, moved to Ada before they could be policed. She noticed and didn't bother to defend against the glance. She was busy defending against something else. My memorandum, 18 months ago, she said, crisp. It was adapted through 5 committees as things are. There's no single author. Newcomb's mouth compressed. The funds program is the funds. Yes, Ada said, and there was something behind the yes that didn't care for being erased. And the work is the staff's. Humans, Wolfe murmured, always gnaw the bones of credit and control. Miss Vance. Why my house? Her strip answered, because they would come here. Because not even they would risk bringing chaos inside this room. Because your silence can be trusted. About that, Ross said smoothly. Mr. Wolfe, our board would be prepared to ensure a generous honorarium if you were to observe, strictly observe, Miss Vance's requested 24 hours, and to consult only with counsel in any actions thereafter. Ha, Wolfe said softly. There it is. The purchase. Mr. Ross, my silence is not merchandise. It is discretion, which is dearer. You will not tempt me. Not that way. Ada let her hand fall from the key. Who has a third key? I asked, because we would keep circling until someone admitted physics. No one, Newcomb said, unless someone had a locksmith make one. Your building super has a nephew, I suggested. Does he eat? Ross gave me the lawyer's tolerant gaze for the crude. We'll inquire. You will produce the typed notes, Wolfe said. All of you. Tonight or at 9 in the morning, to my door. Miss Vance, you will bring me the altered sheets, the original and the doctored. We will examine their typography. Typography, Newcomb repeated, cut between contempt and fear. Typefaces have habits, Wolfe said. So do people. The bell rang again, not with haste but with the patience of someone who knows he's expected and enjoys the knowledge. I went, because I go. In the vestibule, Fred's voice rose low behind me. Raincoat just took off. On the stoop waited another florist's box. No messenger in sight. This one was heavier. I brought it to the office and set it on the low table beside the tray of surrendered leashes. No, Iris typed. Quick. Wait. Archie, Wolfe said. I cracked the lid with my penknife. The scent wasn't flowers. It was camphor and paper. Inside lay tissue, and inside that, a thick envelope with Morland's crest, and, on top, a single brass key on a ring threaded through a red string. The label on the string read, in tidy type, Cabinet B. Ada's face didn't change. Everything else about her did. The key at her throat might as well have been hissing. Wolfe didn't reach. He never does when there's a smell of bait. "No one touch it," he said. "Archie." I took the key off the tissue with a handkerchief and held it to the light. It was new brass, not the softened color of something that had ridden years on a ring. The red string was the office supply kind that exists to make clerks feel domestic. The label Cabinet B had been typed, uppercase, clean, with O's whole, not Iris's bitten ones. I set it back on the tissue and eased the thick envelope free. Inside lay 2 sets of papers. On top, donor talking points and a 1-page credit sheet naming program lead, Ada Breck, oversight, executive, comms, interim. Beneath, the same sheets in another version, program lead, program office, oversight, managing director, comms, I. Vance, no personal names. The second set had the telltale spent toner look of something run from a print. The first set was a little too crisp. On both, the O's were round as peaches. There was also a typed note on plain bond. It began without greeting, "Return what is not yours. You will need this. Announce the correction. If you are wise, no one will be harmed." Again, no chewed O's. The lowercase r had a tiny nick in its foot. I'd seen that once, on the slip under our door. "Same machine," I said. Wolfe grunted. The anonymous whisperer likes to take credit without name. He moved his eyes to Newcomb. "Is that stationery yours?" "Yes," Newcomb said thinly. "Standard crest. The materials are." He stopped, not from caution but from a shortage of expletives he was willing to use in our house. Ross was watching the key the way a fisherman watches a line. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, pleasant. "We will want to take possession of that. It's fun property." "You will do nothing of the kind," Wolfe replied. "It entered my room in a manner I dislike. It will leave when I'm done disliking it." He flicked me a look. "Put it in the safe, Archie." I crossed, opened the wall safe behind the books, and nested the tissue, key, envelope, and the anonymous note together. I closed steel on brass. The tray of their surrendered little lives glinted back at me. "April 5th, Wolfe resumed. "Miss Breck, your alibi from 6 until after midnight is noted. Where were you from 4:30 to 6? "In my office," she said. "I left at 5:30 to get to Lenox Hill. Transit was a mess. There was a delay. Who saw you at 5:30? "The guard at the desk," she said, "and the night porter on 4. "Names," Wolfe said. "Luis at the desk, Mr. Heller on 4. "Mr. Ross," Wolfe went on, "counsel for Morland. Where is the label stock used for those cabinet tags?" "In the copy room," Ross said, "under the perforator." "And the typewriter that makes them?" "A ridiculous, indestructible Olympia," Ross said. "The staff use it to appease donors who like printed notes, but not the slickness of computers." He smiled faintly. "I prefer email." "Of course you do," Wolfe said. "Miss Vance, do you have access to that room?" Her strip slid out. "Yes, all staff do." Lenore shifted, then got up, crossed to the window, and put 2 fingers on the sash, as if the night air could forgive any of us. "Do you mind?" she asked me, a plea pinned her attitude. "I mind everything," I told her, and got between her and the latch. "If you want oxygen, try breathing." She colored, partly from being thwarted, partly from the fact that a faint gray smear had kissed her fingers where the brass was still marked. She rubbed them on her coat, realized it, and put her hands in her pockets. Wolfe's head tilted a degree. "Sit, Mrs. Wyatt." She sat. "Someone," he said, "wanted a scene." He sent a key to my room. He sent a prompt under my door. He has typed his mischief on the same instrument for both. He wants the story to run along rails of his choosing. Phew, Mr. Goodwin. Yeah. Saul. I went to the hall and phoned Panzer. He picked up on the first half ring because he has a relationship. With telephones, you could call intimate. I put it in brief. Moreland Fund, Cabinet B, Super's envelope, the Olympia in the copy room, the guard named Luis, a porter named Heller, and the anonymous typewriter that makes round O's and nicks its R's. Also a florist's delivery routine with no flowers. Door to door in 20, he said. You want the super now? If you can get him out of his envelope. Yes, I said. And if there's a sign-in log, maybe it needs to remember who came and went on April 5th after 5. He grunted assent and was a gone man. Back inside, Wolfe's gaze was on Iris. Miss Vance, you have chosen not to speak, he said. Why? She folded a strip with her thumb. To keep faith with a promise, it said. To whom? He asked. She paused long enough for a fridge to hum in the kitchen before sliding out another. Someone who is not in this room. Wolfe made a small dissatisfied sound. Promises are admirably adhesive and disastrously blind. Mr. Newcomb, the draft memo about restricted funds. Explain it. He explained it. It was exactly the kind of memo that breeds in institutions. 3 paragraphs and a throwaway line that, if isolated, made him sound like a man who repainted lines on roads after dark. It was never adopted, he finished. The board rejected it. There was no reallocation. You kept the draft, Wolfe said. Council did, Newcomb replied defensively. Ross spread his hands. We keep all drafts. It's what we do. That doesn't make it policy. Lenore's fingers had found a rhythm on the arm of the chair. This is ghastly, she announced. It's just power. You all chasing each other around a file cabinet while I'm supposed to write a piece about community. Power is a community, Wolfe said, almost absently. It is merely not one you wish to attend. The phone on my desk buzzed. Oh, it was Fred. Your raincoat had a buddy, he said. The buddy went up your stoop and tested your door after the florist box. He wore black gloves. I could introduce his cheeks to the brick next time if you like. Not yet, I said. Hold your fists. If he returns, note his shoes. I always note shoes, Fred said, aggrieved, and clicked off. Mr. Ross, Wolfe said, turning the wheel. The fund's copy room. Keyed? Locked at 6, Ross said. And before? Open, Ada said quietly. We're not a bank. No, Wolfe said. You're a pantry. Someone has been stealing the spice as Iris's hands pressed the tin box, as if to keep it from sliding. She wrote, The anonymous typist knew we would come here. Yes, Wolfe said, which is why he sent his mummery to my house. He wishes to frighten and to polish his fable. He expects us to accuse Miss Breck. He expects Miss Breck to defend, not to accuse. He expects Mr. Ross to offer to purchase my inaction and Mr. Newcomb to protest. Propriety. He expects Mrs. Wyatt to declare disgust. He expected you to say nothing. He screwed his mouth. I detest being expected. Ada's chin lifted a fraction. If you think I altered our materials, say so. If I thought that, I would be bored, Wolfe said. No, Miss Breck. Your habit is competence, not slyness. You would not risk an alteration that relied on a proposition so easily undone by metadata. The author of this prefers the crude romance of a typewriter. A man with an idea of drama, Ross's eyelids moved. A man, he repeated blandly. We shall see, Wolfe returned. He shifted his focus to Iris again. Miss Vance, your typewriter, where is it? She considered, and then slid a strip. In my office. Olympia, I typed these at home on another. And the one at home, she hesitated. Another strip. Portable Royal. Old. Do both share the bite in the O? I asked. She shook her head. Only the Royal. Then the Olympia in your office does not chew its O, Wolfe said. And the anonymous typist does not chew his O, but nicks his R. You, he indicated Newcomb with a small incline, do not type. Mr. Ross uses a computer like a civilized barbarian. Miss Breck? I can type, she said. On? The Olympia, she said. And a laptop. I don't own a typewriter at home. Mrs. Wyatt, she smiled without warmth. Pencils, pianos. I leave machines to people who like them. The phone saved us from her philosophy. Saw. The super's envelope's been steamed and resealed, he said without preamble. Glue prints bright as sunrise. Inside is a brass blank, not cut. The string's missing. The log's a mess. April 5th, after 5. 4 staff out. 1 courier in at 5:54, no name. Out 6:08. Luis remembers a florist box delivered at about the same time. Copy room Olympia is present, ribbon dry like a wit. I'll stay, I told him, and see if the Olympia's types an R with a nick. It does, he said. Right foot of the R is a little short. O's are round. I hung up and told Wolfe. His lips made a very small curve. So, he said, our anonymous typist uses your machine, Miss Vance. And he used it to instruct us to look at April 5th and to send me a key he wants me to think came from the super. He is clumsy with envelopes and clever with people. He spread his fingers on the arms of his chair. Now we will stop letting him herd us. Mr. Newcomb, who besides Miss Breck has reason to resent the erasure of their name from a program? Who would gain if the fellow's launch faltered? Newcomb's eyes moved, slow and selfishly. Everyone loses, he said stiffly. Not everyone, Wolfe murmured. The man who wants to be your savior does not lose at all. Newcomb's mouth opened and the shut was angrier. Ross's smile went to neutral, which for a lawyer is a weapon. Ada stared at Wolfe like a woman who had been waiting for somebody to say the sentence out loud. Lenore, Wolfe said, turning a degree. When he proposed a replacement you would respect, did he name one? She hesitated, which made the room lean. He didn't give a name, she said. He said, someone you respect, someone the public will accept in an instant. Then he laughed. I hung up. Good, Wolfe said. Do not cooperate with laughter. Miss Breck, your key. Ada's hand went up to the chain, faltered, and then did the brave thing. She unthreaded it and placed the key on the tissue beside the red string model. I used the handkerchief and held them together at the notches under my lens. The cuts matched. The mailed key was a newborn twin. Duplicate, I reported. Cut from hers or from the super's real spare. The one in the envelope now is a blank. Thank you, Wolfe said. Mr. Ross, who besides the super and staff knows that the spare key is stored in a sealed envelope with a red string. The string is a superstition, Ross said. You'd only know it if you'd seen it. Precisely, Wolfe said without looking at him. Saul is at your building. He has seen it. Ross's gaze stayed pleasant and not at all comfortable. My phone trilled. Fred, low. Buddy came back, he said. Tan raincoat's gone. Buddy went around the corner to your alley entrance. Didn't try the door, just the knob with a gloved hand. Then moved on. He looked up at your office window like he was waiting for curtain call. Shoes black, rubber soles, crepe, cheap, no hat. Stay planted, I told him. If he auditions again, memorize the shoes. Already did, he said, offended, and clicked off. Wolfe let the silence do an orbit. We will not be stampeded, he said. The man outside likes pressure. Let him stew in it. Mr. Newcomb, I will tell you who your savior is. He is the one who knows your house and your building's habits. He knows your stationery and where it sits. He knows the Olympia's ribbon and the label stock. He knows the super's quaint red strings. He's at ease enough to come and go when the copy room is open and to steam an envelope without astonishing your guard. He prefers drama over subtlety, which disqualifies Miss Breck. He admires leverage, which does not disqualify you, Mr. Ross. Ross managed to look simultaneously amused and insulted, which is a skill that should be taught in law schools. I make a practice of admiring leverage, he conceded. I do not make a practice of burglary. No, Wolfe agreed. You make a practice of reducing risk. This, he indicated the florist box with a twitch, is an increase of risk. Whoever did this trusts himself to improvise when a thing goes wrong. He also trusts that you, Mr. Newcomb, will prefer keeping the funds linen in its hamper. Newcomb's jaw did a slow, unwilling grind. I don't answer to blackmail, he said. Everyone answers, Wolfe said, to the conditions under which he eats. Some hire lawyers to help them pretend they do not. We will alter a condition. Miss Vance. She looked at him and readied a strip. You will speak 2 words, Wolfe said. Now, and when you do, you will say whom you promised to keep faith with. She sat very still for 5 heartbeats, then 6. Her eyes were on Wolfe's, and there was something like anger in them and something like gratitude. When she spoke, it was soft and steady, and no one breathed. My sister, she said. Lenore's head jerked. Ross didn't blink. Ada closed her eyes once and opened them. Newcomb made a calculation, lost it, and remade it. Wolfe nodded, satisfied with the tone as much as the content. Thank you. Your sister is Marla Vance, Iris said, and her voice had the clear line of a woman who speaks for a living and has been starving. She was assistant to the superintendent. She has been on leave since March. I promised her I would not expose her until I had proof. She was frightened. Of what? Ross asked smoothly. Of being involved, Iris replied, and shut her mouth as if it had cost her a month to open it once. Saul called. Courier outfit is Bay Metro. April 5th, 5:54 delivery to Moorland. Florist box for communications office. Paid cash. The copy room Olympia's Platen has ink ghosts from the exact heading on your program lead sheet. Somebody typed it twice. Heller the porter's got camphor in his locker with a roll of the same red string and 2 envelope flaps he didn't have this morning. He says he was told to keep his mouth shut by a man who could make trouble for his pension. He's worried about his pension. Which man? I asked. He says, the lawyer, Saul said. But when I asked him to point, he pointed at the wall. Stay with him, I said. Don't tug yet. Wolfe's lips compressed. Mister? Ross, your profession breeds scapegoats. Heller will do. I will not have him. Miss Vance, when did your sister last come to the building? April 3rd, Iris said, now that she had allowed the dam to crack. She picked up a box from the super and took it to my office. It was stationary. We were assembling press packets. Did she have access to the super's shelf? She helped him with it, Iris said. He has arthritis. There we are, Wolfe murmured. Opportunity without intent, enough to terrify a dutiful girl who understands how much a story can ruin a man with an old job. Ross cleared his throat. If Ms. Vance has a family member in the building, Mr. Wolfe, that's context you should have shared. She did, Wolfe said, when it mattered. You, mister. Ross have not shared that you gained the Moorland account via recommendation from a donor you described as now deceased, and that the draft memo you retain gives you a lever you would be tempted to pull if your managing director grew obstinate. I do not imply you typed my notes. I imply you are vain enough to like how they shape the room. Ross's mouth accepted the blow and did not show the bruise. You're wrong, he said very gently. I often am, Wolfe said. Briefly. Archie. Compare the label on the key string to any label from Moorland that Miss Vance has with her. Iris slid a folder from her bag. She had brought samples. I didn't blame her. I set the key's label beside one of theirs. Same stock, same half-inked E at the end of a line, same faint oil smudge at the base from a hand that used a machine with a worn spacer. Same bench, same roll, I said. Thus, Wolfe pronounced, typed in Morland's copy room by someone who uses it often enough to oil it badly. Luis, Newcomb offered, as if he wanted off this raft. Luis logs what he sees, Wolfe said. He does not type donors' dreams. Mr. Ross, your office? My assistant uses it, Ross said. I don't. Names, Wolfe said. Ellen Farrow. We will speak with her, Wolfe said. Tomorrow. For now, we will unsettle the man in the raincoat. Archie, telephone Saul again. He will station himself inside the copy room. At 9 exactly, he will close the door, type one line on the Olympia, return what is not yours, and leave the door ajar. Then he will wait to see who cannot resist completing the chorus. That's bait, Ross said. Yes, Wolfe replied, soft. It is also courtesy. Our anonymous dramatist invited himself into my house. I will invite him into his and made the call. Saul listened, grunted approval once, and rang off. Wolfe took a breath, deep and measured. We are done for tonight, he said. You will all leave your devices. Miss Vance, you will remain for 10 minutes. Newcomb started to object and wilted at Wolfe's gaze. Lenore rose as if the chair had burned her. Ada reclaimed her key from the tissue and put it back on its chain with hands that shook once and stopped. Ross picked up his smile and his recorder from the tray, but not the smile. At the door, I said to them, there will be another meeting. Try to survive until then. When the door closed on the last of them, the room changed key. I gave back the toys from the tray because I don't make enemies by forcing grown men to cross Manhattan without their leashes. Wolfe had said leave them. He hadn't said for how long. They went out, one by one, clutching circuitry like talismans against thought. Iris stayed in her straight chair by the door, fingers on the tin box, eyes on Wolfe. He didn't look at her until the latch clicked behind Lenore. Then he let air in, just enough to remind the bats they were mammals, and settled heavier into the chair that had no right to hold him. Miss Vance, he said, you have paid. You have contrived, and you have spoken. Now you will stop withholding. What frightened your sister? She saw something she understood too late, Iris said. If it cost her to continue, she paid. On the 5th at 5:30, a courier brought a florist box to my office. Marla signed. 10 minutes later, when she went to return a cart, she passed the copy room. The door was almost closed. Someone was inside, typing. She didn't see his face. She saw his sleeve and his hand. The sleeve was dark, fine, with 4 working buttons at the cuff. The hand wore a glove, but the fingers were bare at the tips. She smelled camphor. She went on. Later, she found the supers shelf messy, as if the string box had been opened. And she told you? Not until the next day when the first note came. Then she cried because she had signed for the box. Did she recognize the typing? She said the machine was loud and heavy. The paper was thick. She called it the clacker. She's not a typist. Did she speak to anyone about it? She told me. And Ellen Farrow. Ellen is kind to the front desk. She brings the guards coffee. Wolfe's lids half lowered. She would. Iris closed the tin and stood. Wolfe lifted a finger. You will not return to your office tonight. Go home by an indirect route. If anyone attempts to speak with you, do not be polite. I can manage unkindness, she said, almost smiling, and looked at me. I took her to the door, passed her back her phone and dignity in that order, and opened onto the April that couldn't decide. Fred's bulk was a shadow across the street, under a tree that had no right to suggest spring. Halfway down the block, a dark sedan idled like a thought someone didn't want. As Iris stepped to the curb, a man detached from a doorway, no hat, cheap soles, and studied the traffic with sudden interest. Left, I told her. Then right, then cab. She went left. I went right and paused to light a match that had nothing to do with cigarettes. The man pivoted to keep both of us in. Fred's head tilted. The cab rolled. Iris took it. The man made no move. He watched the cab's taillights until they were memory, then turned his shoulders to our door and drifted past as if stores were open. I memorized his ears and called Fred with my hand. Back inside, Wolfe had beer and disapproval for company. I gave him the street in 90 seconds. Good, he said. A man who watches and does not follow wants a different prize. Archie. Saul, I called. Saul was a whisper. Doors propped. 9:02. Someone just came in. Woman. Early 30s. Dark hair. Short, grey cardigan. Flats. Office badge clipped to her belt, upside down. She closed the door, looked at the ribbon like it had told a joke, and typed 3 lines on the Olympia without test. Same phrasing. Announce the correction. If you are wise, no one will be harmed. Then she tore it off, folded it, twice, and put it in a florist box. She wiped the keys with a tissue and checked the wastebasket. She's neat. She took out her phone and said, soft, it's done. Name she spoke was Cam. She left with the box and a face like paper. Follow, I told him, and relayed to Wolfe. He set his glass down with the care of a man filing a brief. Ellen Farrow, he said. Probably, I agreed. Ross the ventriloquist. Not necessarily, Wolfe said. She may say Cam as one says saint, to bless herself with power. He may be innocent and vain. He may be guilty and vain. We will not speculate. We will use. The phone went again. Saul. She walked 2 blocks, cut west, met Camden Ross on the corner outside a wine bar. He didn't go in. He took the box, said, all right, 3 times with 3 different meanings, and put the box in his trunk. He didn't touch her. He told her to go home. She went. He drove south. Stay with the trunk, I said. I am, Saul said, and hung up like a satisfied cat. Wolfe breathed once. Tomorrow at 11, bring them back, he said. Mr. Newcomb, Mr. Ross, Miss Breck, Mrs. Wyatt, and Miss Farrow. Not as counsel's escort, as a participant. Tell Fred to sleep. Tell Fritz I will forgive him. Tell Miss Vance only what she asks. The office regained its hush. Outside, Manhattan cleared its throat and waited. We would speak. At 9, Wolfe went up to mutter to the orchids, and I went to the phone to invite people to a late morning they would hate. Newcomb's assistant asked if it was strictly necessary, and I told her it was, which is as near as you get to a yes from me before 11. Ross's secretary said Mr. Ross had back-to-back commitments, and I said he could bring them if they typed. Otherwise, 11. Ada Breck took the call herself and said only, I'll be there. Lenore was awake and indignant before coffee and wanted to know if there would be an audience. There will be witnesses, I told her. For Ellen Farrow, I asked for her directly. She came on with a voice you'd pick to read weather reports. Calm, precise, and not sentimental. Miss Farrow, I said, Mr. Wolfe would like you to attend a conference at 11, under whose authority? It wasn't defiance. It was a woman checking the locks. Mine, I said. I'm the one on the phone. There was a crisp breath. I'll come with Mr. Ross. You'll come on your own, I said. He may also attend. A half beat. All right. Saul reported while I was still closing my notebook. Ross put the box in a credenza in his office at 7:30, he said. Locked. He met Newcomb at 8 near a lobby cafe. Passed him an envelope, not the box. Discussion 2 minutes. Flat faces. Newcomb kept the envelope. Ross returned upstairs. At least they eat, I told him. Sit close to that credenza. If he moves the box, move with. Wolfe came down at 10:58, smelling faintly of moss and Latin. Fritz had laid coffee we would not deserve. At 11:01, the bell began to do its contribution to culture. Newcomb first, punctuality, trying to win a prize. He brought a tired suit and a fresh offense. Ada next, pale and wired tight. Lenore came on the beat, carrying scorn like a satchel. Ross at 11:09, smiling like he had invented clocks. Ellen Farrow last, almost on his shoulder. Short, dark hair, grey cardigan, and an expression that had learned how to tell the truth and avoid it, both. Wolfe kept his chair and his empire. I did the tray routine. Ross surrendered his phone with a tiny roll of the wrist that promised to remember the insult. Ellen placed hers as if it might hatch. When they were arrayed, Wolfe did not welcome them. "Miss Farrow," he said, "last night at 9:02, you entered the copy room at the Moreland Fund, typed 3 lines on the Olympia, folded the page, placed it in a florist box, and telephoned someone you called Cam. Then you delivered the box to Mr. Ross. You cleaned the keys with tissue. You wear flats that make no sound, and your badge last night was clipped upside down. If you deny any of that, you will be made unhappy." She didn't look at Ross. "That's correct," she said. Ross's smile went tighter. "Mr. Wolfe, if you have men trespassing in institutional office spaces, I have men observing, which your institution uses badly," Wolfe said. "Miss Farrow, who asked you to type those lines?" She looked down at her hands and then up. Her eyes were steady. "Mr. Ross asked me to type clean copies of the anonymous notes that had been received. He said they would read better for the board. He didn't like the font on the printouts and didn't want electronic files. He asked for them to be typed. He told me to put them in florist boxes to keep them separate from the rest and to stop them being thrown out by accident." Ross moved one finger and caught himself before it became a hand. "That's true," he said. "We were preserving evidence in a way that would not invite metadata debates. We have learned, Mr. Wolfe, that sometimes preserving a physical chain is wise. I did not ask Miss Farrow to send anything to your house." "Nevertheless," Wolfe said, "someone did. Twice. The same someone who steamed the superintendent's envelope and replaced the spare key with a blank. The same someone who told Heller the porter that the lawyer could make trouble for his pension if he talked. Miss Farrow, did you tell Heller not to speak?" "No," she said. "Heller is kind to all of us. I bring him coffee." "Who told you to call Mr. Ross Cam?" I asked. "Or did you come to it on your own?" She colored briefly. "Everyone calls him Cam," she said. "Not to his face." "Thank you," Wolfe said. "Mr. Ross, did you meet Miss Vance's sister?" Ross blinked. "I don't know Miss Vance has a sister," he said smoothly. "Do I?" "Marla Vance," Wolfe said, "assistant to your superintendent. On leave since March. She carried stationery for Miss Vance on April 3rd. She smelled camphor on April 5th and saw a sleeve with working cuff buttons. She's frightened because the envelope she signed for was used to deliver mischief. If you tell me you do not know her, I may believe you. I will not if you tell me you do not know how the super keeps his spare keys." Ross adjusted his tie a half-inch, then decided he hadn't. "Mr. Wolfe, this implies—" "It implies you do not arrange your neatness as well, and you think," Wolfe said. "Miss Breck." Ada started as if he'd called her name in a dark room. "Did you ever discuss with Mr. Ross your objection to the erasure of program credit from staff documents?" Wolfe asked. "Your memorandum that became the Fellows program?" "No," she said. "I discussed it with my ceiling." "It's not council's job to divide spoils." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "Mr. Newcomb, on Friday you planned to launch a program naming Ms. Wyatt. A man telephoned her and proposed a replacement she would respect. Who, in your view, is the man she would respect?" Newcomb didn't like the question because it made him think about his people as people. He took a second too long. "Professor Larkin," he said finally. "He's a composer she's written about. He's on an advisory panel. Who proposed him to you as a compromise when the notes came?" Wolfe asked. Newcomb blinked. "Mr. Ross did," he said, surprised at himself. Lenore snorted. "Of course he did," she said. "There's an industry for this." "The management of shame, Mrs. Wyatt," Wolfe said without warmth. "You will confine yourself to answers when asked. Mr. Ross, did you suggest Larkin?" "Only if Miss." "Wyatt refused," Ross said. "Cool. It is my role to propose alternatives that protect the fund's reputation. I did not invite this situation. I'm attempting to resolve it by staging it," I said, because I have bad habits. "Camphor, florist boxes, typed drama in a copy room you keep oiled badly." "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe murmured. "All right," I said. "I'll keep my adjectives." Wolfe leaned his head back, pressing the nape onto leather. "Miss Farrow," he said, "when you typed last night, you used phraseology that matches the notes placed in my house. Who gave you the language?" "It was in copies of the notes I was given," she said. "3 versions. I compiled them. I didn't write them. And the labels? The key tag stock?" I asked. "In the copy room," she said. "Anyone uses them. Heller is the one who cuts and strings at holidays. He's proud of it." "Miss Farrow," Wolfe said, "you will fetch the Olympia's last ribbon, the one that was dry as a wit yesterday, and the log of copy room use if one exists. You will deliver them to Mr. Goodwin this afternoon." Ross's smile lost another millimeter. "You will refrain," he said gently. "Those are institutional properties." "No," Wolfe said. "They are my evidence. Mr. Newcomb, if you object, you may summon the police and invite publicity you dread. Or you may instruct counsel to be still for 1 day and permit me to finish my work." Newcomb's mouth flattened to survival. "Miss Farrow will cooperate," he said. She nodded, quick relief and terror shaking hands. Saul phoned. I took it in the hall. "He moved the box," he said. "Carried it to the men's room, emerged without it, took the elevator to the garage, drove." I checked. "The box is in the ceiling panel above the far stall. He thinks with lacquer." "Sit on it," I said. "If he goes back, change the lacquer." Back in the office, Wolfe was assembling the last pile. "At 5 today," he said to the room, "you will all return. Bring with you the original notes you received, all of them. Miss Vance will bring the altered and unaltered sheets. Miss Farrow will bring the ribbon and the log. Mr. Ross will bring the envelope he conveyed to Mr. Newcomb this morning. We will end this." Ross lifted both hands in a parody of surrender. "On what outcome?" he inquired. "On the truth," Wolfe said, "which is not negotiable." I took the door duty. As they filed out, Lenore paused. "If he staged it," she said low, "he did it elegantly." "That's the worst kind," I told her. "They get standing ovations." Iris, who had stood by the door like a sentry, looked at me as if I had kept a promise I didn't make. "Thank you," she said. "Don't," I said. "We're not finished." The afternoon behaved. At 2, Ellen Farrow arrived at our door with a manila envelope and a backbone. She handed me the old ribbon from the Olympia, a thin copy room log with more gaps than dates, and a page of labels she'd typed on the same stock they use for cabinets. I took them to the office, where Wolfe had his loupe ready like a priest with oil. The ribbon was striped with ghosts. Wolfe rolled it under the glass and hummed when the lowercase r showed its short right foot, and the capitals hit the platen at a hair's variance. The B, a skein high, the A faint on its left leg. The labels matched the type. Cabinet B lifted the B just enough to be itself. The log had scrawl for April 5th. EF 552, copy room, L 554. Delivery, Heller 605. Lockup. That could be innocence or choreography. The only thing it wasn't was helpful. I phoned Saul. He was with the ceiling. Still perched, he said. Ross hasn't visited the men's room cathedral again. He's in and out, faces with Newcomb, phone calls I can't hear, and once he stared at the ceiling like he'd hung a star. He'll come for it when he thinks it matters. Make him think, I said. At 4:55, I set the room as if it were a diagram. Red chair for Newcomb by the globe, settee for Ross and his smile, yellow chair for Lenore's scorn, the corner for Ada's key, a straight chair by the door for Ellen and her correctness. Iris, where she could watch all of it and reveal as much as she chose. Fritz delivered coffee and dismay in equal portions. They came at 5, parceled by temperament. I took devices again and watched fingers that didn't want to let go. Wolfe's eyes were closed when I stepped to my wall. When he opened them, he owned us. You have brought what I asked, he said. Mr. Goodwin. I laid out the notes like a dealer who likes the deck. Newcomb's typed demand, Ada's urging to postpone, Lenore's resignation prompt, Ross's legal lecture in anonymous voice. Wolfe lifted each, ran a fingertip along a line, and then pushed one to me. The R, he said. I set the loop over the curve near the end of correction. The right foot was short. The O's were fat as honesty. I checked them all. They sang the same song. I picked up the label for Cabinet B. The B sat high as a petty king. Same machine, I said. Of course, Wolfe said. Miss Farrow, type Cabinet B again. There Ellen rose, crossed to my desk, and did as told. The fresh label came off the roller with the same high B and a faintly pale A. Wolfe nodded once. Miss Vance's strips we can ignore, he said. Her home royal bites its O. These notes do not. These were typed on Moreland's Olympia. Anonymous prompts to my house. Tags for a key that never was. You have been predated by a man who prefers the noise of type to the noise of conscience. Ross's smile dimmed to a professional fog. Mr. Wolfe, if you are implying my office elected to use a typewriter instead of a printer, I plead guilty in advance. I am not implying, Wolfe said. I am stating. Mr. Newcomb, the envelope mister. Ross gave you this morning. Newcomb had come braced. He fished it from his briefcase and set it on the edge of the desk like a confession. I opened it. Inside was a board memorandum draft, council language in its Sunday clothes, proposing the postponement with phrasing familiar as the notes. Announce the correction, protect the fund, consult counsel. It had been typed, of course, on the Olympia. The R was short-footed, the A faint on its left leg. Preservation, Ross said, mild as milk. If we are compelled to defend our actions, the physical chain is superior to a file that can be altered invisibly. This is basic practice. Practice, Wolfe murmured, becomes habit. Habit, indulgence. Indulgence, impunity. His eyes turned. Heller, Ada jerked. Heller? Heller was told to be quiet by the lawyer. That's a porter's phrase for a convenient monster. But Heller also keeps camphor in his locker and ties red strings. At holidays, he is not our author. He is a prop. Miss Farrow, on April 5th you used the copy room at 5:52. Yes, she said. She had decided that her life would go better if she didn't lie. I typed an agenda for a board member. And labels. I didn't type any notes that day. The notes were typed that evening, Wolfe said. And the next day. And last night at Mr. Ross's instruction, you typed their choruses again. I did, she said. She glanced toward Ross and stopped herself from making him large. Who told Heller that the lawyer could make trouble for his pension? I asked. She nodded. Small. I told him, Mr. Ross could help with it if he kept the room secured, she amended. He's frightened of retirement. I didn't threaten him. He misunderstood me on purpose. Camphor, Wolfe said, almost to himself. A valet's trick. A copy room appropriates the habits of a cloakroom. Ridiculous. I laid the ribbon on the blotter. Wolfe turned it with a finger. You see, Mr. Newcomb, it is elegant because it is crude, he told the air. No metadata, so no forensics. No printers, so no logs. Florist boxes, so the guards remember romance instead of chain of custody. A key labeled to look like yours, so you argue about access instead of motive. And all of it typed on your own machine, in your own building, by your own habit. It is audacious when aimed at the city. In my house, it is a jape. Lenore fanned a hand. So which of these priests did it? She demanded. Counsel? Director? Assistant? Or do we draw lots? No lots, Wolfe said. Mr. Ross, you offered to purchase my silence last night with a generous honorarium. You proposed Professor Larkin as an elegant salve for your reputational burn. You had Miss Farrow type notes in a style you prefer, counsel's appearance of objectivity, and deliver a box into your trunk. You placed a second box in a ceiling. Why? Ross could have been carved. To keep evidence safe, he said. Of what? Wolfe asked, and the word lay there like a trap. Of your forethought? You created the thing you now preserve. Mr. Wolfe, Newcomb said, his voice a grind. We are not at war with counsel. You are at war with the appetite that uses you, Wolfe said without looking at him. Mr. Ross, you will fetch the box from the ceiling you have adopted and place it on my desk. You will do it now, or I will call the police in Miss Vance's hearing and instruct Mr. Panzer to meet them with the ribbon and the log. Ross glanced at me. I was the wrong person to ask. He glanced at Ellen. She looked at her hands. He looked at Newcomb and saw no raft. He adjusted his tie a half-inch, and this time it moved. Cam, Lenore said, suddenly gentle. Sit. The corner of his mouth went wry. It said he admired her for saying it and despised himself for needing it. I'll bring the box, he said, and you will discover nothing you do not already suspect. Bring it, Wolfe said, and closed his eyes as if to rest between courses. Ross rose. I was at the door before he could develop ideas about exits. In the hall I dialed Saul. On his way, I said. He'll try to be delicate. Not in my chapel, Saul said, and clicked off. When I came back, Iris was watching Wolfe, not Ross. She had her strips in her tin as if she might need their armor again and didn't want it. Ada's hand had slipped to the key at her throat. She left it there and didn't flinch. Newcomb stared at a point on the globe where land pretends to be continuous. Ellen placed her palms flat on her skirt and kept them very, very still. We waited. Wolfe breathed. The city held. We could feel the hour limping toward us. We didn't know yet whether we had brought a man to heel or merely put a ribbon on his habit. But the box was coming, and with it, the choice Wolfe had engineered. Confession or consequence, stagecraft or clarity. Ross came back in 9 minutes with Saul at his shoulder like a conscience you can't disbar. The florist box was under Ross's arm. Saul's hand was near it without touching, the way you walk beside a man who might decide he likes bridges. I took the lid and the room breathed in. Camphor lifted, not shy. Inside were tissue, a smaller manila, and a spool of red string. Saul's brows told me there had been more in the ceiling and there would be more in rooms this man liked. Wolfe nodded. I passed the manila to him. He slid out its contents with 2 fingers, in the kind of distaste he saves for greed. There were 3 typed pages, phrases repeated like scales. Announce the correction. If you are wise, no one will be harmed. Protect the fund. They had been typed as if someone were practicing his own echo. The R's foot was short, the A limped, the O's were peaches. There was also a cut key blank in a little glassine. Hardware store tag still on it. 2 steamed envelope flaps, a flat sable brush with glue stiff in its hairs, and one label that read Cabinet B with its B perched where it shouldn't. Last, a list in tidy print. Call LW, someone you respect. Call IV, postpone. Call A, end correction draft. Deliver to NW, with a question mark that looked smug. Wolfe set the list in the center of the blotter and the others around it, calm as a man laying out a meal. "Mr. Ross," he said, "you will not insult me by calling this preservation." Ross looked at the evidence the way a man looks at a mirror when he suspects it of meanness. His cuff had 4 buttons, and they all worked. Ellen's eyes, more honest than his, dipped to them and up again. "I made a mistake," Ross said finally. He said it as if the word mistake had a degree. Newcomb was dithering. The launch schedule was unrealistic. The governance questions are real. The press packet had errors that would bite. I intended to force a pause that would save the program. "That is all, and your method?" Wolfe inquired. "To let the fun mug itself so that you could arrive with towels?" Ross's mouth thinned. "To give the board the courage it lacked. If they believed a crisis existed, they would permit us to fix what should be fixed before the world noticed. I never intended permanent harm." Ada's voice was quiet, and even an octave lower than her throat. "You made it look like me," she said. He met that and didn't blink. "Because you would survive it," he said. "Because you're competent. Because Mr. Newcomb would not fire you. He would only summon counsel. Because you of all people would insist that we get it right." She sat very still. Newcomb made a raw sound and got civilized in time. "You risked the fund," he said. "You risked me." Ross didn't turn. "I saved you," he said, "from yourself." Wolfe made one of his small baritone vowels that can peel paint. "You saved no one. You fed yourself, on necessity, on drama, on your conviction that you alone perceive risks. You hired watchers to sniff at my door. You steamed a working man's envelope and let him take the fear of it to bed. You sent trifles to my house as if it were theater." He flicked 2 fingers. "Mr. Goodwin." The list I held it nearer Ross. "NW," I read. That's Nero Wolfe, for those playing at home. You ask yourself whether to invite him into your story so you can buy him? You did. It didn't go well. Ross's face altered a degree, which on him was a sob. "I needed the one force New York would respect," he said. Silence. Wolfe leaned back as if bored with the planet. "You do not understand my silence. It is not a gasket to stop your boiler from bursting. It is an instrument. I employ it. You do not rent it. Now I shall tell you what you will do and why you will do it." He lifted 1 finger. "The Fellows launch proceeds Friday as planned. Miss Wyatt will be announced as the inaugural Fellow. There will be a statement acknowledging Miss Breck's original memorandum 18 months ago, without exalting her or diminishing anyone. The shepherd will not be eaten to prove the flock exists." 2nd finger. "You, Mr. Ross, will tender your resignation as counsel to the Moreland Fund, effective at month's end. In your letter to Mr. Newcomb, you will confess. Not crime, intent. You attempted to orchestrate a delay by anonymous means. You will state that you acted without board authorization. You will privately send me a copy of that letter for my satisfaction. 3rd finger. You will deliver to Mr. Goodwin the box in your credenza and any others you have hidden. You will give Mr. Panzer leave to inform the porter that no one will endanger his pension, and you will pay for a replacement of the superintendent's envelope, string, and glue brush." "Or what?" Ross asked, not defiant, curious. "Or I will keep my promise to Miss Vance for another 2 hours and then telephone the district attorney with the ribbon, the labels, the notes, the list, Miss Farrow's testimony, and a story whose moral the press will adore. The lawyer who forged a crisis to sell his cure. You will not enjoy how that plays." He let the words stand there and acquire weight like rain. Ross sat down. It wasn't surrender. It was a man counting the remaining chairs and picking one. "I'll resign," he said, and if he choked on it, he didn't offer us the sound. "I'll draft the letters." "Good," Wolfe said. "Miss Farrow, you will keep your job if you can. If you cannot, you will call Mr. Goodwin. I will provide you a reference that speaks to diligence corrupted by obedience." Ellen swallowed and nodded. "Thank you." "Mr. Newcomb," Wolfe went on, "you will stop using panic as an executive tool. You will listen to Miss Breck when she speaks about program design. If you do not, you will be back here and I will charge you again." Newcomb inclined his head the way a man does when he has decided not to confess what he won't yet correct. "Understood," he said. "Mrs. Wyatt," Wolfe said, and his tone softened a sand grain. "If you love community, write the piece." Lenore regarded him and nearly smiled. "I will," she said, "if council doesn't try to conduct it from the toilets." "Pooh," Wolfe said. Iris hadn't moved. She had watched the balance shift the way a tightrope walker watches wind. "And my sister?" she asked. "She will be left alone," Wolfe said. "And you, Miss Vance, you will begin speaking again at work. Your silence is no longer a kindness, it is an abdication." She breathed as if she had permission, and nodded once. "Yes." Ross stood. "You are always going to win," he said to Wolfe, not bitter, simply enumerating. "No," Wolfe said. "You are always going to lose." "I merely hastened you. I took the box, the list, the string, the brushes, and the blame, and locked them in the safe." Fritz appeared with an expression that said, "Men who tinker with dinner deserve famine," and announced that coq au vin had survived our ethics. Wolfe rose because his conscience lives in his stomach. At the door, Lenore paused. "You know," she said to me, "he dressed the part." The working buttons, elegant theatre. He had props, I said. We had a stage manager. When they were gone and the street stopped craning, Wolfe and I sat. He forked chicken with his usual justice. After the third bite, he offered the summation that passes for grace with him. "Men like Mr. Ross," he said, "call their appetite prudence and their vanity stewardship. It is a vocabulary that feeds on institutions. The cure is not exposure alone, it is refusal." "Refusal to what?" I asked. "To admire them," he said, and reached for bread. At 6:30, Saul called to say the men's room cathedral was empty, and he had followed Ross to his office, where the man dictated to a stenographer and then sent her home early with a bonus and a warning not to get philosophical. At 7:10, a messenger in a Navy windbreaker delivered 2 envelopes to our door. The first bore Newcomb's seal. It contained a single sentence acknowledging receipt of Ross's resignation, effective the last day of the month, with appreciation for prior service and regret for recent judgment. The second was Ross's private confession for Wolfe. 4 paragraphs in his careful hand, admitting method and motive, disclaiming malice, and vowing to cooperate in any internal review. Wolfe read both and set them in the safe with the camphor and red string as if he were laying a wreath. At 7:40, I phoned Iris. She answered with her voice now, low and steady. "I'm home." "You will stay," I told her. "If anyone knocks, they will have to spell their name with an R that drags its foot." "My sister is with me," she said. "She's sleeping." "Thank you." "Thank Wolfe," I said, "because truth is a habit too." Fred came off his post at 7:45 and parked himself on our stoop like a decorative boulder. "Raincoat and Buddy belong to Trent and Beecher Protective," he reported. "Unlicensed curiosity, rented by the hour by people who don't want receipts." I had a word with the foreman. "He'll be billing Mr. Ross's firm, retroactive and grateful, buy yourself breakfast," I told him, "on someone else's vanity." At 8:02, Wolfe looked at the clock and did nothing about it. Silence sat with us until it had earned its keep. When the hour struck, he permitted himself a small breath and reached for the beer. "That," he said, "is the interval Miss Vance purchased. It has expired." He didn't pick up the phone. He didn't need to. Silence had done the job he set for it. Friday, I put on a tie that knew how to look useful and went to the Moreland launch because Wolfe prefers his public sentiment in reports. The lobby had the borrowed Sheen institutions buy for special days, rented ferns, a podium with a crest, coffee that nearly meant it. The press were present in that hush that says their editors don't know if it's a blurb or a bruise. Newcomb gave the remarks he'd been rehearing in his head all week and earned the applause that goes to men whose hair is honest and whose sentences are short. He announced the Moreland Fellows, said the words community and partnership until they sounded like nouns again, and named Lenore Wyatt with a calculation that managed to look like delight. She took the mic and did not bleed on it. She talked about composing for rooms that weren't built for chandeliers and had the nerve to thank the staff who had read her proposals without yawning. She didn't name Ada. She didn't have to. Newcomb did, 2 minutes later, with an acknowledgement that the Fellows program originated in a memorandum by our program officer, Miss Ada Breck, whose diligence we commend. It took 3 seconds and fixed what had taken 18 months to fray. I threaded the crowd long enough to spot the cast. Ada stood 2 steps back from the donors, hands at her sides as if she'd tied them there herself. When her name was said, she let the corners of her mouth move, and then took them back. Lenore came off the stage like a woman who had performed a clean landing on ice and found the rink still the same. We exchanged a nod that counted as truce. Ellen Farrow operated a tray of press folders like a human metronome. Her badge was right side up. Luis at the desk wore a tie he would keep for Sundays. Hella had a new red string at the key shelf, threaded neatly through a bright brass key with cabinet B typed straight. He saw me see it and put a hand over it as if it might catch a chill. I shook his hand instead. He had no camphor in his pocket. Professor Larkin turned up as if summoned by rumor and shook Lenore's hand for the benefit of photographers who didn't know where to point. He didn't offer to replace her, which was wise, because it would have gone badly for him. Ross was conspicuous because the air he once displaced was empty. His name did not cross any lips. Later, after the applause had been laundered and folded, a staffer taped a bland notice to the bulletin board. Counsel to Moreland Fund resigns to pursue other professional opportunities. We nodded at the fiction like gentlemen. I brought the bouquet back to the brownstone and handed it to Wolfe without ribbon. He was at the big desk frowning at a catalogue of orchids that refused to learn English, I reported. He preferred my version to the press's by a wide margin. "Miss Farrow?" he asked. "Working," I said, "typing names that aren't anonymous. She said to tell you she won't forget how you spoke to her. She thinks perhaps she should develop a taste for different bosses. Perhaps," he said. "Marla Vance." "At home," I said. "Staying there. Iris thinks she'll go back to the building when she feels less like a loaded box." Newcomb sent flowers, not in a florist's box, which showed someone's having fun. Wolfe grunted. Fritz came in with a trout that had had a better life than most counsel. We ate in a silence that had changed faith but not function. It is a sacrament in our house. There had been too much speaking in it lately. At coffee, Wolfe regarded the window where my smear had been and which I had polished back to innocence. "You dusted my latch," he accused mildly. "I dusted your latch," I admitted. "Consider it an early warning system that paid for itself." He grunted again. "Camphor and envelopes," he said. "The idiocies a mind will indulge to hear its own cleverness applauded. Mr. Ross's method was the vice of men who confuse stewardship with sovereignty. A lawyer is not a prince. He is a servant with tools. When he forgets that, he invents suffering to justify his fees." "That's pretty," I said. "You can embroider it on a sampler for the Bar Association." He scowled, which on him is a signature. "Pfui, they would sue for the stitches." Miss Vance's money will be returned beyond our fee. I cocked an eyebrow. You didn't promise a refund. I do not sell silence by the hour, he said. She bought courage. She paid enough, he sipped. We kept our bargain. That is a nourishment. Your bargain, and I kept the windows, I said, which balances to my mind. He set the cup down. It does not balance. You will have the locks changed, and tell Fred that next time he may introduce a cheek to a brick if a man in a raincoat with crepe soles paws my door. I'll pencil it in under homicide, I said, though I prefer Fred's cheeks unindicted. Cheeks are not prosecuted, he said, closing the book on the subject. He rose, which meant the day was over if the city didn't disagree. He paused at the door to the hall. Archie? Yeah. Miss Wyatt will write something decent. Miss Breck will insist on something exact. Mr. Newcombe will attempt to be both and will fail, then hire a new counsel and attempt to be both again. Your Miss Farrow will choose a boss who seeks use rather than adoration. The porter will sleep. The super will learn to keep his strings in a box that does not steam, so if the morality of the city improves by a hair, it is because one man declined to be admired. Which one? I asked. Me, he said simply, without pride, and went up to the orchids. That left me with a dish, a room, and the faint scent of camphor that had worked its way into the rug and was losing. I put out the lights and decided that if anyone came scratching at our door with a florist box, I would give them a button they could practice working. That's a metaphor, but sometimes the only way to end a performance is to close the curtain and declare the show over. On my way to bed, I checked the latch once more because habits deserve dessert. The brass shone. If the city wanted drama, it could buy tickets elsewhere. We had eaten, we had argued, and for the moment, we had refused to admire. It was good enough for a Thursday.